Okay, hello and welcome to the Big Budget 2022, and we're going to now focus in the next 1 hour on the big promises made in the budget speech, the claims versus the reality. Was this budget meant to be an economic booster shot at a time of a pandemic and also in election season? Has it been that big booster, or has it turned out to be somewhat of an anticlimax, a status quoist budget that beyond the tinkering did not really deliver on the big promises? That's what we're going to try and decode. First, let's just take a look at the big takeaways of budget 2022. So, no change in income tax. Expectations of tax being either reduced or raised, nothing. There's been a 35% hike in government spending on new projects, what is called capital expenditure. There's a promise of 60 lakh jobs over 5 years, though it's unclear where these jobs are coming from. 30% tax on cryptocurrency. So cryptocurrency has not been banned, but it's been heavily taxed. Government has promised to launch its own digital currency. The government is spending a total of about 1 lakh crore on government housing and water connections. Now let's look at the claims versus reality, that despite the claims of being a pro-farmer, pro-Aam Aadmi budget, there are actually only minor increases to outright cuts in all the key areas of welfare spending. Let's look at health, so important during the pandemic. Just raised by only 0.8% from 85,000 crores, 85,900 crores, just up to 86,600 crores. Agriculture, again, just up only by 2.5% from 1.48 lakh crores to 1.5 lakh crores. Rural development is actually down from 2.07 lakh crores to 2.06 lakhs crores, down by just 0.3%. And the big one, a massive drop in the jobs guarantee scheme of the government, down by 25% at a time when jobs are under severe stress. Also cuts in food subsidy, down by almost 30% from 2.9 lakh crore down to 2.1 lakh crore. Fertilizer subsidy, also down 25% from 1.4 lakh crore to 1.1 lakh crore. Petroleum subsidy is also down from 6,500 crore to 5,800 crore, down 11%. So this is one of the big stories coming out of this budget. And let me just go across straight to Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog, the government's premier government think tank. Thank you so much, Rajiv Kumar, for joining us. Rajiv Kumar is always with the budget. There is the rhetoric of the speech, which promises transformation, which promises growth. And then if you look at the hard numbers, many of which the finance minister didn't read out in her speech, significant cuts or minor increases, health, rural, agriculture, and Rajiv Kumar, massive cut in Narega.
Vasu, I'm afraid you're reading the wrong numbers. And this is a basic premise of budget analysis, which is that you always compare budget estimates to budget estimates. I've been doing this since 1994, and I can tell you that you don't compare revised estimates with the budget estimates of the next budget, because there will also be revised estimates for this year's budget as well. So if you look at from budget estimates to budget estimates, health expenditure is increased by 12%, education expenditure increased by 16%, the one that you talked about, another one that you talked about, rural development.
Yes.
Rural development again is a slight increase, but not a decline. Therefore, that also is not a decline. On Narega, it's 78,000 is what was there in the original 2021 budget.
Okay.
2021-22 came up because of pandemic. And here, Masood, you must recognize that Manrega, increasing allocations to Manrega is a sign of poor economic health, because Manrega is a demand-driven scheme. So, the demand goes up when people are out of jobs and when they go back to their villages, which happened in 21-22. But we are hoping, and I hope all of us are hoping, and the budget is laying down the provisions for that won't be required. So it has gone back to what it was originally. And just finally, let me just complete. On the food subsidies that you talked about. The food subsidies again went up to 98,000 because of the Jan Kalyan scheme of providing the free rations to 800 million people or so, and therefore it went up there, and it's come down again. And if you look at the budget number prior to that, which was a whopping 5.4 lakh crore, that was done to clean up the FCI budget, debt to the government. Now, and the fertilizer subsidy again, what's happening there is that went up significantly because 21-22 saw urea prices globally growing up from $300 per ton to $900 per ton, and we are hoping that they will come down as this year unfolds. Also, because we are hoping that natural farming, which doesn't use chemical fertilizers, the use of chemical fertilizers come down. So honestly, I think you should change these numbers that you are displaying and compare budget estimates to budget estimates.
Okay, let me respond to this point you made, that you're saying compare budget estimate to budget estimate. The reason why the revised estimate becomes important, Rajiv Kumar, is that it gives you an idea of what the actual demand or the actual felt need is. So when you talk of Narega, when you rightly say that Narega had to be boosted up to 98,000 crore because of the fact that there was this huge surge in demand, which the government would like to believe is going away, and we'd all like that. But if you look at the reality, and we'll put the numbers up on the screen, the last available data for household demanding work under Narega is actually showing from December 2018, if you look at it from about 3 years ago, to 1.9 crore households demanding work. December 21 is 2.4 crore households. So as of just literally a few months ago, let me just finish very quickly. I'm saying the demand continues to remain high, jobs continue to remain under stress. So it's quite likely that there is going to be a pressure on schemes like Narega, and hence the comparison to say, is it prudent to actually cut the budget or to reduce it almost to last time when it doesn't, the demand doesn't seem to have significantly come down?
No, but the point is that the budget has always got to be forward-looking, and therefore what you expect after, hopefully the third wave is over, that the economy is going to pick up. The economy is expected to grow at 8.5% on a 9.2% increase. So it's not going to be the base effect any longer. And because you've got all the schemes that have been put out there, like the production-linked incentive schemes, or the infrastructure spending, the public, capital spending, etc. You are expecting jobs to increase in the urban and rural and sector. Now, for example, in the highly impacted sectors of hospitality, in the budget is given 50,000 crore for emergency credit link guaranteed scheme, which is earmarked only for the hospitality sector, which is again where the informal jobs will increase, and therefore the likelihood, just a second, the likelihood of Manrega demand going down is very high. But the point to be made is that this is a responsive government will always respond to an emerging situation. And God forbid, but if if there is some uncertainty that strikes us, etc., which is always there, allocations will be
then you'll always increase. But can I just ask you on the point that you made, that you are saying that hopefully there won't be a jobs crunch or a stress or an unemployment stress because of the way the budget has provisioned for that. And I want to try to understand from you how that actually adds up, because one of the things that many people have been saying, including what you just said, that the capital expenditure, what the government spends on projects and so on, has shot up by almost 35%, which is significant. From about 5 lakh crores, it's gone up to about 7 lakh crores. But if you look at what happened in the last budget, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, it's exactly the same. So the 2021-22 financial year budget, 34% increase in capex. Similar jump to what has happened now. So I think the question many people are asking is that if you already had that kind of an increase last time, and similar infrastructure pipelines were mentioned last time, this entire PM Gati scheme was announced during the Independence Day. It's almost a year, it's almost 7 to 8 months old. All of this has already, we've gone through a cycle of this already. Where is the evidence that it's managed to create those kinds of jobs?
Budget allocation for Gati Shakti has been made in this budget. And that's the first time this, because after the announcement on August 15th, the master plan was being prepared. And as it involves multiple, ministries, 7 sectors and more than that, and therefore, and we want to create a seamless, integrated, logistics plan.
I'm on the capex. I'm saying capex has increased the same amount earlier.
I'm responding to the point that you have seen already, that what the allocation has been made. The allocation has been made this year. And you will recall, if you look at the numbers, Vasu, if you look at the numbers, last year the original allocation was 5.5 lakh crore. The revised estimate is 6 lakh crore.
Yes.
And that just shows that all of that particular capex was actually utilized. And and because I was worried, and we were always worried that the revised estimates come down below what the budget estimates are. But this did not happen. So all that money was actually disbursed and utilized in the infrastructure development.
No, I'm not disputing that. That's a good thing. I'm asking you a different question. I'm saying that despite the fact that actually the capex was kept at about 5-something lakh crores, over 6 lakh crores was spent, why is that still then, why are jobs still considered to be a problem? Why are we still seeing, large scale perception of job losses and economic distress?
Yeah, because of the second wave and then the third wave. And the fact is that the first half of 21-22 was a massive shock, where the first quarter declined by 27%, and the jobs are coming back now in the third and the fourth quarters. And in the fourth quarter, you get struck again by the third wave, so that, the high employment intensive sectors, the services sector, etc., suffer again. So which is why the jobs, which is why the jobs haven't been created in the economy, because infrastructures, the multiplier effect of the infrastructure has not been able to take hold. But the jobs have increased in the export sector, and the export sectors are now being given another fillip by reduction in the import duties of all the components in
So Gati Shakti, I'm still not clear, because it's not clear in her speech at least, what is the actual allocation to Gati Shakti? What is the amount? What is the number?
It's not. I have not looked at those numbers. I don't think quite evident. But you must assume that the entire capex, because it is meant for physical infrastructure, a very large part of that would go to Gati Shakti, because it covers all the 7 infrastructure ministries.
Okay, but on the jobs, because again, numbers are sort of put out, and it's not clear what is the actual source of how the jobs are going to be created. And we've just done a kind of graphic to look at the history of job numbers and promises in the past 4 to 5 budgets, and we'll try and see if we can get that graphics up. So in this latest budget, the finance minister said 60 lakh jobs in 5 years will be created thanks to this production linked incentive scheme, where companies are given incentives if they produce more. In 2021, it was 1.5 lakh jobs via ships recycling. In 2020, it was a more general aspirational India will create better jobs. 2019, need to invest in job creation. In 2018, 70 lakh formal jobs will be created this year. Rajiv Kumar. So, I mean, are these jobs actually created? Are these, how you see what I'm saying? There's
point, of course, taken, and there is a clear distinction between formal sector jobs and the informal sector jobs. And today the government has put out the figures from the EPFO, the increase in numbers of the Employment Provident Fund organization. And you see a consistent increase in the in the number of people employed who pay the EPFO, the Employment Provident Fund, and that is an evidence of new jobs having been created.
Right.
Now, the problem, however, is, and the issue, however, is that in the informal sector, where I think 80% of our workforce resides, the jobs have been lost because of the pandemic in the last 2 years. Why? Because the high contact industry sector could not pick up, did not pick up economic activity, which is why now the government is now focusing on the MSMEs and on the hospitality sectors in an attempt to create the jobs in the informal sector, at the same time trying to formalize these jobs.
Trying to formalize these jobs. Let's see how these...
For better social security.
Let's see how these how these announcements play out and how it translates on the ground. But Rajiv Kumar, thank you so much as always for coming on. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Always a
Okay, let's go across now. So we've heard from the government in a sense. Let's go and get a view from the other side of the aisle. We have Dr. Palanivel Tyagarajan with us. He's, of course, the Finance Minister of the Government of Tamil Nadu. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Tyagarajan, for joining us. I don't know if you had a chance to catch a little bit of what the Vice Chair of the Niti Aayog was saying, where he basically seems to suggest that, contrary to the devil in the detail, this is a growth-oriented budget. The fundamentals of the economy are already strong, as the economic survey says, and this is simply building on that. Are you convinced?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thanks for the invitation. I did catch a bit of my friend Mr. Rajiv Kumar's comments, and I have no reason to doubt that his intent and the vision is what he says it is. But I am, in general, a person who worries a lot about outcomes relative to intent. As you know, I wrote recently, I don't know, a couple of months ago, that the whole budgeting process seems to get too much attention on the prospective because people think it'll change their lives, and not enough attention on the revised estimate or even the final account of 2 years ago, which is really where we'll see what the impact was. And so, this is much in keeping with the other budgets of this government. It has some good things. It has some, really out of the kind of realm announcements that I think will be almost impossible to implement. And at the end of the day, when we look back a year from now, 2 years from now,
so
we'll know. But
let's break it up then. Let's break it up one by one. Let's first tell me,
sure,
what do you think in this budget you think is unrealistic or is disappointing?
Well, unrealistic, let me give you one example, and then disappointing, I give you a couple of examples. Unrealistic, I think this notion of one nation, one registration is extremely unrealistic, right? I mean, anybody who has any idea of how the land management and revenue administration works in any state, we struggle. The fundamental, profound problem is that the British didn't come here to set a long-term government. They came here to extract wealth and go. So the whole design of revenue and land management and all that is based on making sure they collected taxes appropriately, and we have multiple records of who owns what and so forth. And as you know, right from the days of Adam Smith, one of the building blocks of good economic activity is inalienable and clear property rights and defendable property rights.
Okay.
And so that is already a struggle in the state. For example, right after we came to power, we have passed a new bill, though it's yet to get the consent of the president. I don't know why it's 6 months in Delhi.
Right.
But saying that so much bad things happen in the registration department that we want to give the IG registration the power to cancel fraudulent transference and to criminally prosecute every single time there's a cancellation.
Okay,
so it doesn't allow for bad things.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're saying that's a bit unrealistic.
Yeah.
But in terms of what you saw as a positive, for example, the finance minister said that there's going to be 1 lakh crore additionally which the states can borrow from. We are still awaiting details of how that's going to work. But as somebody who's been very vocal about the centre's sort of unequal sharing of finances and resources, is that you welcome that, the 1 lakh crore?
Actually, you've asked me a fairly complex question. So let me actually maybe go a slight divergence to tell you the positive things I see in the budget first, and then I'll come to 1 lakh crore, which I don't think is that positive. I think it's a sleight of hand in accounting. So the positive things I see in the budget, just so people don't label me a kind of, permanent critic. I'm very happy first that the Union Minister spoke in English. From people like me who could understand it clearly to the global markets where India is an important component now. I'm glad that all investors in the world get to hear it from her directly.
Okay.
There was a lot of restraint shown despite impending state elections. There was not profligacy or really out of whack, descent into populism. The union government generally takes a holistic approach to things. They're masters at marketing and hype. So they need something to leverage. So they do that well. And that's not a bad thing in many ways, to have holistic approaches to different sectors. There was some focus on leading edge technologies, on startup, on battery change for EVs, on the green bonds to create environmentally, and green jobs related to the green industry, to the ecologically friendly industry.
Okay.
And two last things I would say. One, improvement of the banking services through banking at post offices, which is a long time coming, and then the digital banks at the remote or the districts where they don't have enough banks. And finally, I would say, as we had asked on December 30th when we were in Delhi for the finance ministers of states meeting with the union, the continuation of support and grants and schemes to the MSME sector was still suffering because we've had 2 years in a row. So all these I say is positive.
These are positive. Okay, now the 1 lakh crore. Yes. Now the
1 lakh crore to me is pure accounting. It is brilliant accounting, but it's pure accounting. I'll tell you why. If you look at what they have really done, they have cut down the revenue spending in the grants and schemes. If you look at many of those departments, you'll see they're either flat or slightly down or very marginally up. So what they used to send us in things like Smart City, or what they used to send us in kind of other joint sponsored schemes in building or other things, they have just shifted that from grants and schemes to loans. Now, I'm not even complaining in the fact that, grant is an outright grant and a loan is repayable, because interest-free repayable over 50 years is the equivalent to a grant, because of the inflation and the cost of money and time value of money and all that. It just becomes effectively like a grant. Or at least, it's like 75% of it grant, only 25% is repaid.
Okay.
But what they have done is brilliant, because what they've done is taken a bunch of revenue spending out, therefore made the revenue deficit look lower and more fiscally responsible, shifted into capex, therefore make the capex number look high, therefore show the year-over-year growth in capex as a major stimulus to the economy.
I see.
All while basically not really changing anything. And I'll tell you why. Okay. If you look at the last 3 years' capex numbers, every year has been a sleight of hand accounting. Let's take 2021, where there was this big announcement about 10% of GDP being the stimulus.
Yes.
And at that point, most banks, most analysts said this is no way. It's amounting more like 1% of GDP, not 10%.
Yes.
So when the revised estimate came to be printed, they had to show something to show they had done a lot. So what did they do? They took all the off-balance sheet debt that they had accrued in Food Corporation of India and other PSUs, and they brought it back on balance sheet, 1.5 lakh crores. And they said, therefore the capex went up, therefore the fiscal deficit went up.
Okay.
That was 2021.
Oh, interesting.
21-22, the revised estimate to the to the budget estimate, they showed another 75,000 crores, I don't know the exact number, of capex. And they say, look, we have spent our way. But if you look at the detail, the bulk of that is settling the liabilities of Air India to the bank so that they could do the transfer to the Tatas, right? So this kind of capex is not the kind of capex that really creates jobs, that really creates infrastructure, that provides the multiplier effect for growth and all that. This is accounting capex.
Okay, interesting. Right? It's okay. Point made. It's a bit technical for our viewers, but I get your broad point. In terms of basically, you're saying they've disguised this 1 lakh crore as a kind of accounting sleight of hand. In fact, Subhash Garg, former finance secretary, actually tweeted this, saying the increase seems only on two accounts: 1 lakh crore of loans to states and green bonds, borrowing for public sector, no real increase in government capex. So I think there's been some picking up of this. But anyway, fascinating as always to hear from you, Dr. Tyagarajan. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And we'll have you back on soon as we continue to decode this budget. Okay, let me go straight across now to panel, patiently waiting. Apologies for the delay. Zareen Daruwala, CEO of Standard Chartered Bank of India, is with us. Nilesh Shah, member of the Prime Minister Economic Advisory Council, Group President and Managing Director, Kotak Mahindra AMC. Jayati Ghosh, Professor of Economics at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. But let me start with Mahesh Vyas, who's Managing Director at Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, CMIE. Mahesh Vyas, just on this point, and I was going over this with Rajiv Kumar as well, because there's always the rhetoric of the budget and there's the reality of the numbers. And particularly when you look at employment and jobs, are you convinced by this argument that this increase in capital expenditure and this focus on infrastructure is going to address the jobs crisis, which as your data keeps pointing out, has been quite acute?
Well, it will not address the problem of the jobs crisis, even if it generates some jobs. It will obviously generate some jobs. It's not going to be a zero jobs expenditure, but it doesn't address the problem of the jobs crisis that we have. It's not going to stop, let alone reverse the trend. It will not even stop the fall in the employment rate, which is quite persistent. It's unlikely it will even make an impact upon the total jobs, which are there on a net basis. So I think my frank opinion is that the budget is unlikely to make any noticeable impact on jobs.
Why is that? Where has it fallen short? What ought to it have done?
Well, India is a large country with lots of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people who are there in the job market, and tens of millions who are looking for jobs and don't have one. So you require to make a big impact, big scheme, big expenditure to make an impact, to make any dent on that jobs crisis. So, the expenditure, for example, the planned expenditure on Manrega is lower than what they had in the year which will finish this year. So 98,000 crore is down to some 70-odd thousand crore. And even if you compare budget to budget estimate, it is the same. So if you're looking at, compared to revised estimates, the allocation for Manrega is lower. If you compare it to budget estimates last year, it is the same. Now, you may say that we are not expecting there to be any jobs crunch, and therefore there's no need to make an allocation, as Dr. Rajiv Kumar had mentioned. But it is assuming that we don't, then we are assuming that we will not have a jobs crisis, which is not exactly true. The demand that we require to go beyond Manrega into some rural guarantee kind of thing has not been addressed. So I think the jobs crisis remains the way it is, not only from a direct angle, but let me make one more point, Vasu, which is that total government expenditure growth is just about 4.5% or so. So you're not going to spur growth even by increasing aggregate demand.
Yes.
So whether it is macro or micro, the budget is good in many other respects, but from the jobs point of view, it leaves a lot to be desired.
Okay. That's true. The total expenditure has gone up from about 35 lakh crores to about 39 lakh crores. So it's not a massive jump, though the capex number is what has been put out as a kind of 35% jump. But again, there's some little bit of jugglery there as well, but we'll not get into that right now. Zareen Daruwala, this wider point, Zareen, that there is again the kind of talk and promise of growth and of infrastructure and all of that. But if you look at the numbers, the fact that you've cut or negligibly increased crucial areas, whether it's rural development, whether it's agriculture, whether it's Narega, whether it's health, big cuts in subsidies, how do those add up, and does that concern you?
So I feel the government has taken the Keynesian kind of route, where you say you dig a road and you kind of create jobs. And I think that is the track that I see the government taking. And second thing is that India is, if you don't get our logistics right, our hope of manufacturing in India, etc., will certainly take a beating. And if you look at other countries like Vietnam, etc., they've really got a big proportion of the global supply chain movement, which is shifting the China plus one strategy. Actually, Vietnam and Cambodia and Thailand have been big beneficiaries. And I think the government is making the step that we should make India the ease of doing business and logistics, which is a very, very big cost of manufacturing, should be brought down. So I think government has gone down that path. The second thing is we are not seeing private sector big capex coming, and because of low capacity utilization, etc. So I think it is important that the government comes forward and does the capital investment so that it sort of is followed by private sector investment.
Okay.
If you look at housing, housing, 60% of cement industries housing, 35% of steel industries housing. So some of these steps are needed to kickstart, in a way, some of the core sector investments in the private sector.
Right. This idea actually, Jayati Ghosh, someone was saying earlier also on one of our panels that this Keynesian model, that you don't necessarily go in for the option of doing direct cash transfers or basic income transfers into the hands of the poor and the underprivileged, but instead you try to do job creation through higher capital expenditure by the government. Is that necessarily a valid way of looking at this dichotomy, and is it really effective at this point? I mean, is there evidence to show it's been tried and worked or not?
Well, I wouldn't call what is happening right now a Keynesian model at all. I only wish it were. what we have now is a model in which, as Mahesh has mentioned, government spending is actually declining in real terms in what is otherwise a declining economy. We have even private investors saying you have to have the government spending more. We have a massive crisis of domestic demand. We have the biggest increases in hunger and poverty in the world over this pandemic period. And we have massively growing inequality. This is not a recipe for growth in any circumstance. These are things budgets can fix. A different government would have put much more money into basic spending that actually increases the possibility of people going out there and demanding, which would revive small, micro, and medium enterprises. It would put much more money into direct employment schemes, both rural and, I would argue, urban. It would put much more money into health and education. Every other government in the world is doing that, recognizing we need more health spending, recognizing that education is a massive battery, and you have to spend maybe double what you were spending before just to recover, just to get children back on track, to get schooling somehow back into what is important. So I think this is a budget that is completely not aware of the realities of most Indians today, and is just thinking you can do the usual smoke and mirrors trick, pretending you're spending more when you're not, and not reviving demand. It's really a recipe for a further downside.
Okay. Nilesha, member PM EAC, this is a paradox, is it not, that on one hand the government says that we actually have pretty robust tax collection. It's been a big jump. So the war chest is quite flush. In fact, the finance minister read out January's record-breaking GST collections. But at the same time, when it comes to actual spending, it's still unclear how much cash out has actually happened. Again, even with the big capex numbers, we just had the Tamil Nadu finance minister explain how some of it might actually be creative accounting. So the percentage jump is not actually that large, which is Jayati Ghosh and Mahesh Vyas are saying is a recipe. It's a, well, maybe disastrous, but the problem when the economy is under stress, when unemployment is not addressed.
So there are multiple ways of looking at things. Today, do you know that state governments are sitting on 3.5 lakh to 4 lakh crore of cash? Do they have ability to spend? If we don't have ability to spend, it's better not to spend rather than waste money. Number two, if we look at unemployment, well, there are parts of India, and I'm quoting from Mahesh Bhai's report only, like Telangana, 0.7% unemployment, Gujarat, 1.2%, UP, 3%, Karnataka, 2.9%, and Maharashtra, my state, 4.2%. Now, there are models which are working in this state. We need to copy those models in other states, like the biggest state where there is very high unemployment, and I'm excluding smaller states just for better comparison.
Okay.
Bihar, 13.3% unemployment. Rajasthan, 18.9% unemployment. Now, we have to ensure that what we are doing well in Maharashtra, Gujarat, Telangana, Karnataka, we start doing it in Rajasthan and Bihar, then unemployment will be solved.
Okay, but one point, just to take you up on the first, let's make two interesting points. On the first point, when you said that governments are sitting on huge amounts of money, but they're not able to spend it. Now, this is the point I'm trying to understand. If you're saying that if you look at it from the centre's point of view, what is the inability to spend? The inability is that you're not going in for a basic income or a big cash transfer or economic income support model, which technically the centre can, but it's not.
So there must be multiple reasons why government is not able to spend. One, in my opinion, and I haven't worked in government, so you'll have to take it with a pinch of salt. We are more of a physical economy. Babus want files to move. In today's COVID impacted world, you can't take out files to your home. It will be considered illegal.
Okay.
So there is a slowdown in government's ability to spend. Second, there could be in relation to execution capability. In Mumbai, and Zareen will agree with me, I'm seeing metro work stagnating in front of my house for 2 years. So there is stagnation because of COVID-19 impact, and which is where probably we are not able to spend money.
Right. Okay. I'm just going to get, if Jayati Ghosh would want to quickly come in on that, and then we move to, open up to our political panel. Yes, Jayati Ghosh.
You know, COVID-19 is not an excuse for governments not to spend. Most other governments in the world, including middle-income countries, including other countries in South Asia, have increased spending to compensate for the decline in private spending, private consumption, private investment. If the Indian government has not done so, that is a failure of government. We cannot blame the pandemic for this. The response to the pandemic had to be significantly increased public spending.
Okay.
It's in the opposite.
It's okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much indeed for being with us. Let me now open it up to our political panel. We have with us Priyanka Chaturvedi, Rajya Sabha MP with the Shiv Sena, Yogendra Yadav, who's Sanyukt Kisan Morcha, and also Dr. Sudhakar K, Minister for Health and Family Welfare, Medical Education, Government of Karnataka. Also, we have with us Sangam Lal Gupta ji. He's a BJP MP. Thank you all very much indeed for being with us. Priyanka Chaturvedi, just to start with you. Now, is this, as the government is saying, you know, even if we look at the numbers, yes, there have been cuts in you know, some of the welfare schemes and subsidies and so on, but overall they're saying we've increased government expenditure. This is now set a kind of blueprint for growth. So why is the opposition upset?
Government expenditure increasing was something that was expected of them last year. They continue to look at only fiscal deficit targets, not realizing that 85% of this country was being pushed into lower incomes or joblessness. We are facing a massive crisis with joblessness, with the youth on the roads asking for jobs, and we haven't been able to create that. Till how long will this government continue to blame a pre-2014 era? From 2014 onwards, they have been given enough and more opportunities to take the country towards the right direction. Right from demonetization to COVID, every single thing that they have introduced has unfortunately led to a problem where we are seeing a stagnation in job creation. Now, as far as infrastructure building is concerned, great that they're looking at this. But at the same time, we need to have money in the hands of the people, which is not being given to them. How are you answering that? Now, in terms of the rising cost of living, the falling interest rate in your savings, and in terms of falling incomes, how is the government looking at plugging these gaps? They haven't been able to answer any of it. These are the most important issues that are concerning the larger population of this country. And that is an answer that they haven't been able to.
That is unanswered. Okay. Let's just get संगम लाल गुप्ता जी इन. संगम लाल गुप्ता जी, आप बल्कि यूपी से ही हैं और एक उम्मीद थी खासकर क्योंकि यूपी में चुनाव होने वाले हैं कि कुछ इस किस्म की घोषणाएं होंगी जो खासकर जो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, बेरोजगारी के मुद्दों को एड्रेस करेगी. लेकिन ये सवाल किया जा रहा है कि क्या ऐसा अनाउंस किया है जिससे बेरोजगारी एड्रेस किया जाएगा. बस दोबारा एक आंकड़ा दे दिया गया है कि 5 साल में 60 लाख जॉब क्रिएट किए जाएंगे. कैसे किए जाएंगे, कैसे होगा, इस पे कोई
देखिए
डिटेल नहीं है.
सबसे पहले तो मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूं कि माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी और हमारे माननीय वित्त मंत्री जी को मैं धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूं कि ये जो बजट है समता, समानता अथवा समरसता पर आधारित बजट है. सबका साथ और सबका विकास, ये कोई लोक
बेरोजगारी
नहीं है
जी. जॉब्स कैसे क्रिएट होंगे इस बजट से?
देखिए, जॉब बिल्कुल क्रिएट होंगे. हमारी आवाज आ रही है?
हाँ जी, बिल्कुल आ रही है.
देखिए, 60 लाख युवाओं को नौकरियां देने के लिए हमारी सरकार ने इस बजट में ऐलान किया है.
लेकिन
2 लाख आंगनवाड़ी केंद्रों को अपग्रेड करने का प्रावधान किया गया है.
गुप्ता जी नहीं, ऐलान करना एक चीज होता है, आपने नरेगा का बजट काट दिया है 25% से, जहां एक थोड़ी रोजगारी का कुछ तो गारंटी था. वो 98,000 करोड़ से 73,000 करोड़ काट दिया है.
देखिए, 80 लाख गरीबों को आवास देने का और उसमें 48,000 करोड़ रुपए का प्रावधान भी किया गया है. 3 वर्षों के भीतर 400 वंदे मातरम ट्रेन को चलाने का संचालन किया जाएगा, उसका भी प्रावधान किया गया है.
मैं नौकरी जॉब्स की कर रहा हूं. एनीवे, योगेंद्र यादव,
आत्मनिर्भर भारत में 16 लाख रोजगार के मौके दिए जाएंगे.
जी, ये तो एक तरह से वही बजट की जो मतलब घोषणाएं आप पढ़ रहे हैं. लेकिन द प्रॉब्लम, योगेंद्र यादव, इज दैट, एंड वी वर टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस अर्लियर, यू ट्रैक द अनाउंसमेंट्स व्हेन इट कम्स टू जॉब्स every budget a different number is given, but it's not clear where these jobs are coming from.
वासु, जॉब्स वैसे ही आएंगे जैसे किसानों की इनकम डबल हो गई, आपको पता नहीं लगा? You know, for 6 years, the government was saying every day, doubling of farmers' income, 2022, doubling of farmers' income. Every single budget, every finance minister was talking about doubling of farmers' income. As late as last year, Finance Minister Nirmala ji clearly says in a budget speech, the government is committed to doubling of farmers' income in 2022. And when the day of reckoning comes, namely today, this budget, not a word on it. She does not even spend one sentence to say, well, we have doubled it. Sorry, we could not double it. These are the reasons we could not. This is how we plan to do it. We extended 2 years, 3 years, whatever. Not one word. I mean, Vasu, you tell me, where in this world can a government get off with such lies? 6 साल तक डमरू बजाया, doubling.
ये जो आपने कहा, ये मैं एक सेकंड संगम लाल जी से पूछना है। संगम लाल जी, जो योगेंद्र यादव कह रहे हैं, एंड उसके बाद मैं बाकी पैनल पे आऊंगा, कि जो फार्मर की जो इनकम है उसको डबल किया जाएगा, इस साल कह रहे हैं, इस साल तक हो जाना था।
देखिए,
हो गया है, क्योंकि बजट में तो उसकी कोई घोषणा नहीं हुई है।
नहीं, किसानों के हित में ही काम कर रही है। ऑर्गेनाइजिंग खेती करने के लिए बढ़ावा देने का काम हो रहा है।
नहीं, उनकी जो आय है, जो इनकम है, क्या वो डबल हो चुकी है?
नहीं, उनकी आय दोगुनी करने के लिए सरकार पूरी तरीके से प्रावधान कर रही है और निरंतर किसानों की आय बढ़ाने के लिए हम काम कर रहे हैं।
नहीं, मेरा कहना था संगम लाल जी कि इस साल 2022 तक कहा गया था कि हो जाएगा, मतलब अभी भी काम कर रही है, मतलब अभी तक नहीं हुआ है।
नहीं, देखिए, कोरोना काल 2 साल, आपको भी मालूम है कि 2 साल कोरोना काल से देश जूझ रहा था, और देश जब कोरोना काल से जूझ रहा है, इतने कोरोना काल के संकट को देखते हुए भी जो बजट हमारी सरकार ने तो लाया हुआ है, तो एक सराहनीय बजट है। हमारा कहने मतलब
very quickly, yes, I want to come to both Priyanka and you, Yogendra. Very quickly, Yogendra, quick interjection, then I have to go to Mr. Sudhakar. Yes.
To say that this is because of corona is another lie, because we have figure from NSS data of 2018-19. 3 years had passed of the 6-year promise, and what had happened? The figures are that in 2016, farmers' income was close to 8,000 rupees per month. In order to double it by 2022, they had to raise it to 21,000 plus. And in 2018-19, exactly at the midpoint of that mission, the figure was only 10,200 rupees. So the mission had failed already
even before the pandemic. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, Dr. Sudhakar, I'm just coming to you in a second, Priyanka. Dr. Sudhakar, Minister of Health, Government of Karnataka, one of the things that was somewhat surprising was, given the focus on health and the pandemic, the budget for health, Dr. Sudhakar, has only gone up by 0.8%, from about 86,000 crores to 86,600 crores. Does that worry you as a health minister for state?
No, actually, this budget, I really feel that it's a historical and the most pragmatic budget in the last 2 decades, at least, since I've been noticing and understanding the budgets. I should congratulate Madam Nirmala Sitharaman ji and our Honorable Prime Minister to have it is like a foundational budget.
No, but sir, the fact that health is not been, but
especially post-COVID,
yeah,
and we all know during the COVID pandemic situation, what is the role of Government of India specifically was. It has supported every state, and it has, given a due federal importance. The federal structure, accordingly, they have laid such an important role.
On this, we try to focus on specifics.
Creating our infrastructure.
On this show.
Just don't be...
No, on health, sir.
What
on
I would
health.
like to...
Sir, only 0.8% increase in the health budget.
No, you are just talking about this budget. You should understand in the last 1.5 years, what is the kind of support to the states that has been provided by Government of India? be it in vaccination or augmenting our health facilities.
Okay.
Recently, they gave what is called as emergency, augmentation of this pandemic. So they have supported, like in our state itself,
right,
they have given almost close to 850 crores.
Okay, let me
and
just...
today, they announced schemes like mental health program. This is a historical program.
Okay, historical.
And similarly, there is something called as digital registry, which is going to be the out-of-the-box idea, and this will revolutionize the healthcare sector.
Let me just go across to Priyanka Chaturvedi. I think she wanted to come in, but just very quickly, I wanted to say on when you said on vaccination programs are always free. They're paid for by the... In this case, for some time, states had to pay, were made to pay for buy vaccines. Private individuals had to buy vaccines. Never happened before. But anyway, yes, Priyanka Chaturvedi.
Actually, I'm very surprised that Dr. Sudhakar said 2 decades. He did not say since 1947. This is the most historic budget that we have, the country has witnessed, and how grateful we should be about the new India. Putting that aside, I think his response to saying that, listen, this is how the center worked for COVID, I think this was the job of the center. The Indian Epidemic Act also ensures that the center takes charge in cases of pandemic, which they have done. But are we looking at solutions only for a pandemic? Are we looking for only solutions which are temporary in nature, which are transitional in nature? We're looking at long-term solutions, which this budget hasn't been able to give. And just to go back to Sangamji was talking about farmer income. COVID aa gaya beech mein. But मैं उनको बताऊं, कोविड के ही कार्यकाल में एग्रीकल्चरल इनकम वाज द ओनली थिंग दैट शोड अ पॉजिटिव ग्रोथ मोमेंटम फॉर इंडिया. सबसे पहली बात तो मैं आपको ये बता दूं, पर किसानों के साथ जो आपने बर्बरता वो 1.5 साल में की कोविड के कार्यकाल में और काले कानून लाकर, उस वजह से और उसी वजह से आज उत्तर प्रदेश में जो हाल है आप लोगों का, और आप यहाँ पे आकर सारे आंकड़े बता रहे हैं, उसी से स्वाभाविक है कि क्यों आप लोग किसानों के मुद्दों पे टोटली विफल रहे, और इसीलिए शायद उनको और कष्ट देने के लिए आपने फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी भी कम कर दी है.
इस पे संगम लाल जी जवाब दें. फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी काटी गई है संगम लाल जी. फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी 25% फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी जो कम हो गई है, उससे आपको राजनीतिक कई आपत्ति तो नहीं होगी? 25% कम हो गया है फर्टिलाइजर सब्सिडी इस बजट में. काटा है
नहीं
जी संगम लाल जी?
नहीं, इसके पहले 2014 के पहले खाद नहीं मिलती थी.
मतलब
लाठी मारते थे लोग, लाइन लगे रहते थे, 2-2 दिन तक किसान लाइनों में खड़े रहते थे. मगर हमारी सरकार में किसानों को न लाठी पड़ रही है, किसानों को खाद मिल रही है. ये हमारी सरकार में हुआ है.
नहीं, खाद पहले से नहीं, 2014 के पहले खाद नहीं मिल रही थी. ये तो बड़ा...
हरियाणा में लाठी, उत्तर प्रदेश में लाठी, पंजाब में लाठी, क्या आप बात कर रहे हैं?
अच्छा,
देश से दृश्य देखें भाई साहब, प्लीज.
मैं कुछ कहना चाह रहा था.
बट लास्ट वर्ड दो, one thing, Yogendra, this is now somewhat making you put on the hat of a political ad, that everyone thought that there will be some kind of big ticket sort of political announcement given that this is a election time budget. That didn't happen. Is that in a way something to be commended, that the government did show some restraint there?
Well, I don't know. Commendation is one thing, but if you know what is it that the government thinks they would win elections with, you may not feel like commending it.
Okay.
What is the government saying? The government is basically saying, to hell with farmers, to hell with these welfare schemes, look at the elections, we would play Hindu-Muslim and we'll win this election. This is the message. If you wish to commend it, well, I'll try and join you. But basically, you see, what's happening really is that our public policies are completely detached from our politics and political calculus. Our public statements are completely detached from facts, as Nirmala ji's speech was detached from her own figures in the budget. This is what must worry us as a country. So a government, just to come back to that, not specifically on the farmers issue, a government makes an announcement, a grand announcement of a 6-year mission.
Right.
Tom-toms it for 6 years.
Right.
And on the day of reckoning does not, just turns it back around.
Right.
We want to create a country where things of this kind can go on.
Okay.
That is what worries me.
That is the worry. Okay. Well, all right. Let's see. Still lots in this budget to be decoded and passed. And Pranoy Roy is going to be on in just a second to do more of that. But thank you all so much for joining us on the show and for watching. Good night.